Welcome, everybody. This is, oh my gosh, it's actually happening. It's episode 1. Episode 1 of From the Middle. I am Corey Hubble.
I'm Dylan Hubble.
I'm Kendall Ailala.
That's right, folks. And we are so excited. We have been, we've been talking about this for a while. It's actually happening. We did a little bit of a trial run, if you will. How many weeks ago was that?
That was like a month ago.
Yeah,
Was that a month ago
Or
already?
over. Maybe.
Episode 0.
Episode 0.
The lost tapes.
The lost tapes that
You'll never hear it.
You will never hear. But this is From the Middle, a podcast, just 3 dudes that are crazy enough to think that we have anything interesting to say. And yeah, we're just going to kind of get into, I think it would be presumptuous to just start a podcast episode and not explain the context of what brought us together, why we wanted to do this, who we are. Yeah, it would be foolish to do that without any sort of context. So we're just going to kind of get into it, talk about sort of why we wanted to do this and explain the name a little bit, let you know what to expect. We don't exactly know. Imagine a road trip, if you will, 3 dudes in a car. We have our end goal in mind, kind of-ish, but we don't know the stops along the way, and we don't know what it's going to look like in 12 episodes, in 20 episodes, whatever. So let's just kind of get into it. Informal. Welcome to From the Middle. Yeah, again, I'm Corey Hubble, my brother Dylan Hubble, and our good friend Kendall Ailala, and...
Good job on that.
Yeah, I hate this already. I hate this already. So let's talk about why.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Why are we sitting in a room together with mics and pop filters and mixers and computers and iPads? What's going on, fellas?
Because that kind of thing is cool.
It is cool.
Yeah. No, I think we've had a lot of discussion around it, and I think I don't know that we would necessarily consider ourselves experts, probably remotely, on anything. But you know, we have a lot in common. You know, I think we were kind of talking about, if you imagine that sort of Venn diagram, the 2 circles overlapping, imagine a third one, and that's really us. There's a lot in common. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot we can talk about. And then there's going to be some of that fringe outside weird edge that, you know, we have some differences as well. And so we kind of just want to be able to talk about all that, mostly the stuff in the middle, you know, and kind of speak from that place in the middle. But, you know, I think we're going to be a little all over the board over time with some of the subjects that we cover.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of that, you know, kind of the tech, the fun stuff, movies, music, video games, being dads.
Yeah.
You know, and here we are in the middle of America, you know, sitting in a small room recording this. So I think, yeah, we enjoy hanging out and having fun and talking about things that we think are funny or interesting. And so I think that's kind of the place where this is all coming from, right?
Yeah. So you and I, Dylan, this is Corey talking. As brothers, we've always talked about creating some sort of content together.
Right.
We didn't really know what that was going to be. For a while, we thought, okay, let's do like a cartoon together because we kind of do voices and we love comedy and we grew up on Jim Carrey movies and like, let's just create some cartoons where I draw the characters and we voice them together. And then we realized, oh, crap, there's a lot of work in animation.
Yeah.
And then YouTube kind of blew up and we're like, okay, maybe we like review stuff or like do like reaction videos to things and you know, that really never took off, obviously. And then podcasts. 2 years ago, it was July of 2017. I went back and looked. I wrote a Facebook post to my friends that said, hey, guys, I'm just now getting into podcasts. I didn't even know what the icon was on my phone. Like, what are podcasts? And so this was 2 summers ago, and I just became obsessed with it and thought it was a really cool format to create stuff. And it was, you know, kind of all that together. And I don't remember when we said something, but it's like, what if we just did like a guy, dad, geek culture, sort of just guys talking podcast. And then we mentioned it to you at some point, Kendall. You listen to a lot of podcasts.
Some, yeah.
Okay, some podcasts,
But
and then
I listen to those podcasts a lot.
a lot. Okay, yeah. So I'm not entirely wrong. So, and then you were like, "Hey, not trying to force myself in here, but I literally have all the equipment you'd need to do a podcast." And Dylan and I were like, "What? Really?" And so we did this trial run a month ago, and we've put a lot of thought into what we kind of want it to be, and the rest, as they say, is history. So this is ground zero of getting started, and so let's just talk a little bit about what we think that we want it to be. And at this point, we'll talk a lot about it. I'm a big fan of comedy, both stand up and film and whatever. And Theo Vaughn, this past weekend, is one of the podcasts I listened to, and when he was contemplating, do I start a podcast or not, he reached out to some others who had podcasts. Bill Burr was one of those. And Bill said to Theo, he's like, "Hey, man, just start. Like, it'll be 100 episodes. You'll be 100 episodes in before you even know what it is."
That's incredible, too, because you think of somebody like Bill Burr, who some of these guys have been doing comedy so long, especially these nightly multiple shows a night. You'd think they'd have a pretty good idea, like how much different can talking into a mic be than an audience. Sure, you don't have that back, that sort of those faces staring up at you laughing and that to interact off of, but you'd think they'd be comfortable enough to kind of just talk for an hour.
Yeah.
So it's incredible that was the kind of advice that Bill Burr was even getting, like, it's going to be 100 episodes. Don't even worry about it. Just go.
Yeah, you'll figure it out as you go. Like, don't try to solve it. Don't do a paralysis by analysis. Don't try to have it all figured out. You might not know what it's going to be, and that's okay. Just start. So anyway, here we are. And you guys want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting avenue to connect to people, which so you mentioned that the comedians, and I mean, Mark Maron, I think, was probably comedian one who made podcasting popular, and there's been countless others since him, and you have these guys who have had these lucrative and still have these lucrative comedic careers, but still choosing to podcast, and I think there's something different there. I think that there's there is certainly a difference between talking to a crowd and a live back and forth kind of situation where you've got the performer on stage talking to a bunch of people, versus recording a podcast in an office, in a garage, in a bedroom, in a studio, wherever it is, and you don't see the people you're talking to. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something different about the fact that you can prepare. Mm-hmm. You can get feedback. You can do things in a very thoughtful way, mm-hmm. And then the accessibility for people like the three of us, to put a podcast out there and to see if it's touching anybody.
Yeah.
And if it is, then they can respond, they can react to it, and then we can respond and react to them in that way. And it's not as real time, but I think it gives you the ability to kind of slow down and potentially connect with an audience in a way that's possibly a little bit deeper, and a little bit more thoughtful and possibly more entertaining, because you have that time. You've got that buffer period where you can think about what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are so presumptuous that we think we're going to drastically change lives or entertain the world, right?
What?
But there's a
Give it a few weeks.
Yeah,
maybe.
there's a it'll only take 3 or 4 episodes. We'll be fine. There's a certain accessibility to this medium that I think is incredible. Like we kind of often joke about how literally all of history's knowledge is available on the web, and we're looking at cat memes, right? And I think that's true too with podcasts. Limitless entertainment and knowledge can be found. I don't want to say for free. You've got to buy the device to get to the store, but for most people, virtually for free. The podcast, we're not charging anything for this, right? So, or never mind, we're not. So, but I think the accessibility is incredible. Like it's not YouTube, but it's that kind of feeling of there's just so much and it's so big, and there's a little corner for everybody no matter what you're into or what you enjoy listening to. That I think that's just so cool. And so I'm excited. I think for me, that's a little bit of like, this is that niche corner where our dad is listening and 3 other people, in Syria or somewhere. And but that's okay. Like this is our space to live in, and it doesn't matter. It's not a eat the pie till it's gone. The pie just keeps getting bigger. As many people can do this as they want.
Like the sound of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The limitless pie. And so I think that's for me is really cool. And to kind of build off of that from the middle element, again, I'm not so presumptuous as to think that this will be life changing, but we're normal guys. We're here in the Midwest. This is, we're middle class per se. We're, middle of our lives, or give or take. And so I just think, if nothing else, even if we're not changing lives, I think we're relatable. We certainly have a lot in common with not only each other, but I think with a lot of the folks that are, the average mobile device user that can go to some kind of app store or podcast store and go download this stuff. And so I hope, that's my hope, if nothing else, that, we can kind of, we have a lot of fun and maybe connect with a few folks who enjoy some of the things we do.
Which I think maybe brings us to the name of the podcast.
Yeah. So why the name? So our dad gets credit. We were at dinner talking about this crazy idea of starting a podcast. And I don't know if it just came to him in a dream or he had given it thought, but he's like, what about From the Middle? And it was so like right in the face, but just felt spot on. The different layers of meaning, some of which he intended when he said that. And I think some of them we added to the name as time went on. So just for me, I mean, our sort of working description right now is like middle-class guys. We live in the middle of the country. We're sort of in the middle-ish chapters of our lives. We're all dads of young kids. Most of our political views, and we will not get political, but we can typically see both sides of any normally polarizing argument.
Or there's a willingness for some
to have
some level of empathy or conversation to try to understand, where somebody else might be coming
before
from.
we just react blindly to our own personal echo chambers, or like let's talk about it.
Right.
I think there's a lost art of conversation today. I'm really big on that idea. I had a friend a couple weeks ago tell me that she's got a 20-year-old son who can't leave a proper voicemail on a phone for like job interviews, who can't type like a formal email. She's got a 13-year-old who she had to take his video games away because he's just holed up in his room. Just like I'm not like I don't live in fear typically, but I do think we're creating a generation of like kids that are overly dependent on devices and aren't socializing and having conversation. Today, it's hard to disagree or have a conversation without anyone thinking you hate them.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a good buddy of mine about political conversation. We happened to align, but I said, one thing that you definitely don't hear in political conversations anymore? Yeah, I could see that. Just that phrase. Like, you don't hear anybody express this strong political point and then go, yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Nobody says that anymore. That's just not even part of the conversation.
Well, that's back to the lost art, right? Nobody's actually interested in conversation. Nobody. That's a very broad statement. Not many people seem to be interested in a conversation about things. They just want to regurgitate the thing that they just heard from the media source of choice. And anyway, I don't want to get too heavy in that. Another aspect of From the Middle, we're not really experts on many things. Well, what's the proper definition of an expert? It's like 10,000 hours.
Yeah, is that from a book, or was that like, who gave us that 10,000 hours?
You know what they say? The committee of they.
This is one of those. I think it's been said so many times that
an
it's
expert had said.
It's been said 10,000 hours worth, so that's now the definition of expert.
Sure. Let's go with that.
Yeah, all right.
So if that is the definition, we could probably argue humbly that we are experts probably on a couple things. Yeah? But we're also not idiots, right? So we're not experts on all things, but we're not
I'll hold that moniker. That's fine.
Okay.
Every village has an idiot. If our village of 3 needs one, I'll be that voice.
Maybe. We'll be a village of idiots.
The yellow one is the sun. Sorry, little Brian Regan.
Love Brian Regan. If Brian Regan ever hears this, I want him to know that I love him.
My life would feel fulfilled for sure if Brian Regan listened to me making a joke from his own stand-up. Yeah, I'd feel so
No one's
good.
ever yelled that out at one of his shows.
Absolutely not. Yeah, I'm glad I threw that in there. Long-time friend of the show, Brian
Long-time
Regan.
friend of the show.
Yeah.
Brian Regan. Also, so back to the sort of polarity, not to get too serious, but my buddy Simon years ago told me about this book, and I have not read the book, but it's called Culture War.
Sorry, I don't know if that was supposed to be funny. But
No, it wasn't.
That was a great preface.
No, I said I qualified it so that I can't. It could be a horrible book.
You threw me off with the years ago. Years ago, he told me as if you've had plenty of time to read it.
I have had plenty of time to read it. Culture War: The Myth of a Polarized America by Morris P. Fiorina, which basically says like our media loves to highlight and emphasize the polarity of our nation. But the whole premise of the book, according to Simon, because I have, again, not read it, is that most of us are probably only a few ticks away from each other on most issues.
Right.
So from the middle to me means in a world that wants to highlight our differences, there's a huge chunk of our country and our world of people of completely different religious beliefs, of completely different lifestyles, that if we're all honest and we sat down and had a conversation,
Right.
we would find that we're probably a lot closer to each other than we think. So that probably sounds a little sappy, but that myth of how polarized we are, I would argue that most of us are probably not that far away from the middle as it relates to just some basic moral pillars. Do right by others, treat people the way you want to be treated. Anyway, so to me, that's another layer of meaning of the name, and why for us, we were all kind of like, hey, that seems pretty good.
Yeah, it's the official running title that turned into the title. So
Official running title that turned into the title.
Yep. So no, I think that's great. I think you nailed it.
Indeed. So what can people expect, guys? If I were listening to this first episode, if what Bill Burr says is true, that you do 100 episodes before you know what your podcast is, what's our best guess right now? Like, what do we want this to be? What do we want this to represent? Why should people add us to their buffet of listening choices?
Yeah, I think I highlighted that a little bit. I think, ultimately, I hope that we come across as relatable as I think we are. I think we all like feeling in on the conversation, and there's a big overlap in a lot of what people enjoy in life, right? So I think the best way to do it, honestly, I think we should just talk about some of the things we're into to give people a sense of who we are, and because ultimately the things that we enjoy are the things we're going to want to talk about, right?
Yep.
So our hobbies, our interests, music, movies, whatever things we're into, I think, those are the things that ultimately we're going to want to talk about because that's what we enjoy most out of life. This isn't inherently a political thing. It's not at all. This isn't a one specific genre. We talked about that sort of Venn diagram. There's going to be a lot of overlap in what we enjoy. So, I mean, why don't you start? Like,
no, I think you just signed up to start. Your picture is first on our graphics. Oh, and that was such a wonderful segue that I would be remiss if I didn't give you the floor, sir.
The graphics on our social media profiles that you can like, subscribe to, or follow at any time.
At From the Mid Pod on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. At From the Mid Pod.
Awesome plug. Yeah, so I would say I have a variety of interests. I think if I have to
tell us about yourself.
If I have to narrow it down.
Don't jump right to interest.
Oh, it's such a smooth segue.
Who is Dylan?
Who would you say?
Who really is
Dylan? How would you describe yourself? Okay, movies. Huge movie guy. I think that's going to be one of the easiest things for me to talk about. Movies, TV, and we can certainly circle back to discuss highlighting some favorites. Movies, TV, music, more video games in the past than in the present with a wife and a young one. Not as easy to play. I do love mobile games, and I'll play some console games too. I love history and politics. It's not what we're here for, but those are things I also enjoy. But that's probably highlighting the bulk. Sports, for sure. If I had to say out of the gate for anyone curious, I'll pretty much watch anything, but I'm probably like 90% college football, and then the other 10% is probably everything else. So I would be the person that would want to sit and talk about college football literally anytime. But those are highlights. Those are the things I would want to talk about as we continue forward.
Awesome. What do you do during the day, Dylan?
Also super into technology. That's reflected in kind of some of my work past. So technology sales, consulting, things like that. So some business stuff and lots of consumer stuff. So yeah, anything tech related, I'm generally going to enjoy. Interestingly, I don't buy a lot of gadgets, but I enjoy them. I love seeing some of the things that are coming out. I love talking about some of the things. I feel like I have a pretty good radar for what's going to work and last and what's not when it comes to what new tech is rolling out. And I really only get the things I'm super excited about. So I don't spend a lot there, but I love living in that space and working in that space because the things that we can do. I mean, this whole setup is case in point, right? Like here we are surrounded by tech. We're going to literally upload this and stream it to those 3 people in Syria and Dad all over the internet. I don't know why our fan base came out of Syria all of a sudden. But they love us. But
we thank them for listening.
They love us over there. They're like, hey, we're the middle of this part of the world. We want to see what's going on in the middle of that part of the world. So we're definitely going to download. I just imagine one family with 3 devices. And those are the 3 listeners.
Guys.
Like, did you hear what they said this morning when they uploaded their podcast? It was crazy.
Apparently they're huge in Syria.
Yeah. I feel like that's that Netflix show. Have you watched any of that yet? Huge in France? Not Huge in Syria. That's not a show yet. We're going to make that show. That'll be next.
I want to watch it because Chris D'Elia is on it, one of my favorite comedians, and he is in that show, so I want to watch it. But it's the Gad...
See, he's not huge in America. He's only huge in France.
Huge
we
in
don't know
France.
his name. He's the Jerry Seinfeld of France.
The Jerry Seinfeld of France.
As the trailer has said. So
I don't even know who you're talking about, but I saw what you were referring to.
See how that works?
There we
See
go.
how that works? All right.
And that wasn't even a paid plug.
I know.
That just
now
literally
he's going to
happened.
be. Yeah. So now we just gave him Syria,
Yeah,
right?
That's right. So,
All right, Kendall, you're up, brother. You're in the middle on our graphics.
I'm in the middle,
So-
the middle,
So you get to go.
shooting from the.
Tell us about yourself, Kendall.
So I'm.
And how do you say that crazy last name, just so that we're clear out of the gate?
It's pronounced Smith. It's spelled
significantly easier than I expected.
Eilola, pronounced Smith.
Great.
No, it's Ayla.
Sounds Dutch.
It's a.
I just totally blew out any potential Dutch listeners in one comment.
It's not.
Sorry to our friends in Northern Europe.
No, it's a Scandinavian. It's a Finnish name.
I wasn't far off then.
No,
I know my
well,
geography.
Sure, I don't, but I know that Finland is north.
I know nothing about rocks. So
Yeah.
No, I'm I have a wife of 5-6 years. Got some kids, including twins. That's interesting. If anybody wants to talk about that someday.
beautiful kids, by the way.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I make some pretty darn good. Well, my wife makes some pretty darn good ones.
Yeah.
Despite the Scandinavian
In
influence.
spite of the genes from you. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't say that. I was just reading into what you're implying.
Exactly. No, I appreciate it, and you don't have to hedge that. No, during the day, I am currently 2 things: a stay-at-home dad decision that we had made after doing the daycare, both parents at work thing, and that just wasn't working out. And so I'm stay-at-home dad / worship leader for our church, and that's how I spend my weeks doing those things.
With 3 kids, I'm sure you have tons of free time at home. What are the things No. So wife takes kids. You're at home, or you can go do whatever you want to do. What do you enjoy doing?
So I watch movies. But I watch movies not with a whole lot of intent. I just kind of throw on the streaming service of my choice and shop and watch.
There you go,
films.
listeners. Not a whole lot of intent.
Not a whole lot of intent. No, I like horror films. I do enjoy a good horror film.
That's HORROR.
Horror.
As in scary movies.
I like horror movies.
I mean, we should clarify, since I prefaced that with your wife is out of the house.
Right. And I work for the church, right?
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
So there's that. No, I like music, listening to music, playing music.
Artists. Okay, couple artists. Music artists, rattle off some inevitable friends of the show.
Project 86, good friends of the show.
Good.
I used to like Five Iron Frenzy. That's an inside joke that only Five Iron Frenzy people would get. I mean, there's old stuff, new stuff, man.
What about
surf
genres?
around.
Maybe if artists are a little too tough, genres.
So genres, I like rock and roll music. I like the pop rock stuff. I'm a '90s kid, and so like the power pop
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, man.
Blink 182 is one of my favorite bands of all time. Green Day is probably top 2 or 3 in my world. But then also like metal, hardcore, like is sort of the only genre that I can say that sometimes I just need to listen to that, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Everything else can just kind of be backgrounded, but I mean, it's just like every now and again, it's like I just need some hardcore music, which is where bands like Project 86 come into play.
Okay.
And Showbread is another one of my all-time favorites. So music, and then
You said movies, by the way. I know we've got a couple big ones in common, all of us.
Sure. Maybe not so much so. But big movies, so The Lost Boys, I think, is my favorite movie of all time. Kiefer Sutherland film back in his young days, which I just found out that I can't remember his name, the saxophone player from have you guys seen The Lost Boys?
Kenny G, his own name comes to mind.
No. Man, I'm going to have to look it up.
Lost Boys, you said?
Lost Boys saxophone player. Anyway, if you've seen The Lost Boys, you know what I'm talking about. There's this party on the beach, and there's this like saxophone player who's like playing this like oversexed version of his songs. He's not wearing a shirt. He's oiled up, playing a saxophone and singing. And it's hilarious, though it's not supposed to be, kind of thing. I just found out this past week that he is on tour.
Whoa.
Tim Capello?
Tim Capello.
That's the first search result that comes up.
Tim Capello is the guy, and I tell you what, like if you know that scene that I'm talking about from The Lost Boys, like his live stuff, because I went on YouTube as soon as I found out that he's actually still like he wasn't just in a movie. And so I'm looking up some of his stuff, and I tell you what, the Lost Boys scene like makes him look tame, and it's. I mean, I don't know what he's wearing around his nether regions when he's performing, but it seems to be a signature thing.
I was just glad to find out there's more sax players than Kenny G.
I'm actually a sax player.
Oh, look at that!
Yeah.
There's 3 of them now.
There's 3 of us,
just like our Syrian audience.
This is quickly becoming my favorite episode.
Oh boy,
yeah. And I can
you
actually
don't have much
say
choice.
I do enjoy jazz, so I don't mind taking a little jab at like jazz as a genre, because I do thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah.
But no, Kenny G's, something I heard growing up. So
yeah. No, and like mobile gaming, as you mentioned, I'm into. Ever since, most of my adulthood now, I haven't done much of the console gaming. I don't even have an operational console currently.
I'm not at all into the console wars.
Yeah.
Did you have a preference?
Xbox.
I know Corey and I are PlayStation gamers, but
I followed Halo for.
Yeah.
I mean,
so many people did. Wildly popular. I never was super drawn to any of the Xbox exclusives. Not that they're not great. was just not exactly my forte. So.
I mean, when I would have been early 20s, maybe about 20 years old, and I traveled up to Michigan and to see some friends there and stayed at their apartment. And Halo 3 had just come out, and I did not yet have it. And they asked me if I wanted to play it. I kid you not. Like I did the campaign mode on Halo 3, start to finish, one sitting, overnight.
Wowza.
At their apartment. Like
How
that's
many hours for the listener that's not played campaign mode on Halo or any video games?
that was easily 10, 12 hours.
So for the average
straight play.
listener, that's how much Office they watch on streaming in a day.
I suppose, yeah. So I guess when you look at it that way, it doesn't sound like I was being irresponsible.
In hindsight, now that we have access to these binge watching, like I watch 15 episodes in a day, no longer weird to game for 12 hours time. Anything else listeners should know about you? You feel like
Sports.
back on sports.
I'm a
All right.
sports guy, very much at heart. I will watch any sport whatsoever. I love football, and I love hockey, and I love baseball, and I want to say like it's about a 33 situation for me with those three.
So just a quick answer. Is baseball still America's favorite pastime? Just a few words.
Yeah, pastime, yes. Sport, no.
I didn't expect you to actually answer. I thought that was too loaded.
No.
Too loaded of a question.
You ask any legit baseball fan, they have an answer to that question.
Yeah, well, see, I'm not a baseball fan.
Some of them
so.
are in denial.
Now, I say that I would go sit in any baseball stadium and enjoy the game.
Of course, it's a pastime.
I'm not going to watch it on television.
Yeah.
I'm not a big enough fan. I don't support any team. We've got a local, was it AAA team? Is that what they're called for baseball? What's this below?
Oh, the Clippers?
Yeah. So I would go sit in the stadium and enjoy a hot dog on Star Wars night and
Yeah,
and
I
would
think
have a blast.
There are more people going to baseball games than football games, simply because there's more baseball games to choose from.
It's got to be cost too, right?
And cost is huge
Cost is
because
huge.
of that also. And
Especially those minor league or AAA teams, you go to a game for $10. You go to the
Right.
NFL, it's $100. You know?
Yeah. So I wouldn't. Baseball's not America's favorite sport. I mean, all the money's going to football.
Yeah.
All of the TV viewership and everything, and the subscriptions are all going to football. But I mean, baseball, as far as a sport and considering it a pastime, if people want to make a day out of something, I think they're more likely to make it a baseball game.
Yeah.
I think that's still very much American tradition. So when we look at sports and say which one is America's pastime, the answer is baseball. You look at sports and say which one is sort of the top of the mountain, and
Yeah.
that'd be football.
I think that's a good segue. And I was going to say Star Wars, too, was the thing we all have in common.
Oh, yeah.
All Star Wars fans. You know, we've all got our other movies that could rattle off long lists. But I think that's a good segue to Corey because, you know, you're also into some things that we're not. So,
Yeah. So I love that we just mentioned the Clippers. So we record from the middle, from Central Ohio. We are in the outskirts of Columbus. So just from a geographic perspective, that's where we're.
somewhere in the middle.
Hey, look at that.
Somewhere in the middle of Middle America.
We're in the middle of the middle. And so, born and raised in a very small town in Northwest Ohio. Shout out to Ada. No place greater.
I had a bus driver named Ada.
Home of the Wilson Football Factory. So the only place in the
Wow.
world that makes the Wilson footballs for the NFL and
Good for you.
the Super Bowl. So every year before the Super Bowl, they do a little spot on our hometown, Ada, little village of I guess it's like 6,000 now.
Yeah, Ohio Northern University gets a free advertisement here. That's in Ada.
Yeah.
So I think the population probably doubles when the students are in
Yeah,
town versus when they're
that's
not,
fair.
since it's a village. So I think it depends on what time of the year you're asking that question.
Yeah. So grew up pretty small town, came down to Columbus to go to college, went to the Columbus College of Art and Design, CCAD. So by day, I am an artist, designer, and illustrator. The way that looks during the day, I've been doing this new gig for 4 years now, and I still don't know the best way to articulate it. I'm a graphic facilitator in corporate America. So we facilitate, it's a consulting practice, really, in corporate America, where in teams of 3, we host these day-long summits for our corporate clients, typically executives. And while the meeting goes on, I draw live and write and take notes all over the walls. So it's like 8 feet high, 100 feet of wall space. And I literally illustrate and write what they're thinking. I write their thoughts and illustrate their thoughts on the page. So any meeting you've been to where you sat around a table for 2 hours, there was all kinds of dialogue, some rabbit trails that went off. Yeah. If you were lucky, you left the room with 2 or 3 action items on a flip chart, right?
Yep.
Well, what I do during the day is illustrate all that live, including all of those little rabbit trails that there's probably some good nuggets of information in there. So that's my day job. And then I have a freelance business as well where I do anything art related, logos and branding, caricatures, murals.
If you're willing, who
Yes.
are some of the companies that you've done work for? Just to give people a sense, logos and branding is so big.
Yeah.
If you had to highlight 2, 3, 4 companies you've done work for,
So for my freelance thing,
for freelance, I don't expect you to divulge
Yeah.
any private corporate
yeah, I can't talk
information.
about some of the clients I've worked
Yeah,
with
yeah,
in my day job. But-
freelance.
Yeah, so I've gotten to work with some pretty cool clients in my freelance, Hot Wheels, Precious Moments. Do you remember the little Precious Moments?
Yep.
Things.
I'm sure I broke a few. Sure.
The board game headbands. I did some of the cover art for that. Simon and Schuster publishers with some Marvel characters, some Nickelodeon licensed children's books, logos for some high schools in the area. Yeah, so just like, did you have one in mind that you're
No,
From
no,
the
you were
middle.
trying to?
no, I wasn't. I just thought that would be good.
The From the Middle podcast.
Yeah,
I just
from
thought
the-
that would be a good example of like some of the things, because if you say logos and branding, that could literally just be,
Yeah.
oh, you made the triangle before some mechanical company's logo.
I gotcha.
I think, I think you probably err on the side of more fun, bright.
Yeah.
When the job gives you that allowance, you
Yeah.
err on the side of fun, bright, more kid oriented because you enjoy that.
Yeah.
I think you can do anything. In fact, you've done stuff for some of my previous employers. But I think you could do anything, but I think that's what you enjoy doing most.
And the more I've done, and I've done everything like from caricatures like you get at theme parks and murals in people's homes, and I'm not a huge sports guy. I love college football, but if we go back to the Venn diagram analogy, you guys will probably have more in common with the sports stuff. But one thing I love is sports and athletic branding. I love the sleekness of modern sports logos and the identity. That's one of my favorite things.
Give us some visual examples. Like if listeners can Google it or picture in their mind. What are a couple logos?
Well, so one of my heroes in that space is Fraser Davidson. So Fraser Davidson. His company is called Field Theory. He's out of the UK. Just go to fieldtheory.co.uk and Fraser Davidson will pop up. His stuff is amazing, as well as like David Airey, Airey. I'm just doing free promo work for these guys. But just sort of that just think of like any super sleek, like the line work, and I could just geek out and talk about that all day.
I think that's good though. I mean, just to give you a sense, I mean, obviously we'll continue down that rabbit trail, at some point, but I think you should kind of know the kind of things we do. So let's hit some of the big stuff. Rattle off some movies, TV shows, video games. What are some of those things? 'Cause, that's where our heavy overlap areas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't really talk interests. I was blabbing about my career stuff. So interests, big movie, TV guy as well. I'm a big fan of comedy, like I mentioned earlier. I'm a huge stand-up fan. I love the art of comedy, like seeing how these guys create their sets. I watch their podcast. I hear them talk on behind-the-scenes stuff. So obviously, I'm always going to want to talk art and design, comedy. But then I've still got this like good old boy Northwest Ohio kid who just played in the woods all the time. So I still love to hunt. I bow hunt and I fish and I gun hunt as well. But I love hunting and fishing and four-wheelers. And so there's like that interesting mix of like the art kid who like knows a little bit about sports, is average at them, but also loves hunting and fishing.
Yeah, I love air conditioning. So that's not. You didn't describe anything at the end there that appeals to
hiking,
me.
shooting. I'm into all that. I just got my motorcycle endorsement, so I've been riding motorcycles. I don't own one yet, but I've got some extremely generous friends and neighbors who let me ride their bikes, so I'm getting into motorcycles. But then I also love like musical theater. and I love interior design. So like,
Yeah.
that was really
All
weird in
over.
a small town where people couldn't like. He's like really good at art, and he's in the musical, but he goes hunting, and like there's not a convenient category.
Yeah, well, I can so for the outdoors thing, like I kind of said that as a joke. I do enjoy the outdoors. I kind of have a couple I don't want to be outdoors dressed like I'm going to dinner or going to work and be unintentionally sweaty when
Right.
I'm not planning on it.
Yes.
If we're like, hey, let's go outside and enjoy it, and then I get out there and it's stifling, I'm not going to enjoy that. But if you're like, hey, put on a t-shirt and athletic shorts because we're going to go toss a ball around, then I'm great. I'm going to enjoy it. I like travel. I don't do it very much, but I enjoy it. I'm more of a see sights, go enjoy food, but I'm not going to participate in the thing. I don't want to hike, but I'll go enjoy the mountains, sitting and watching and looking
If you
at
could
nature.
just plop me in the mountains.
Exactly. Just enjoy.
I'll
I can
enjoy them.
I can sit. I enjoy.
I don't want to have to walk up to them.
It's the Michael Scott Survivor Man episode where he's out in nature, and then at the end he says, "I don't need that," and his wallpaper on his computer is rolling hills, and he's like, "That's all the fresh air that I need," kind of thing. Like, I can sit in a cabin behind glass where there's not bugs and enjoy the mountains through the window and enjoy the beach from the 50th floor of some kind of beachfront property or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I enjoy nature, and then I enjoy the food. So that's probably something, if I missed anything, I'm absolutely an amateur foodie. I don't aspire to be a food guide, rater, any of that kind of thing. I love food, anywhere from it could be a delicious bag of cheap and dirty Taco Bell up to a great steak at a nice restaurant. And I think there's a place for both. And we've always talked about
Yeah,
that.
what does that say about our palates?
That's that's a little bit of who we are, though, right? Like, we can go and enjoy. We've always said that. Like, we can go and enjoy the nicest dinner, and not that we pay for nice dinners often, but we could go to a really nice dinner and on the way home get a couple burritos from Taco Bell and be about as happy.
Yeah.
And hopefully that means that we're down to earth. I hope that that's what that means, and not just too into food.
some of our family that knows us well is going, it only took them 42 minutes to get to bean burritos.
Shout out to Aunt Vicky for all the bean burritos
Yeah.
over the years.
That's so funny.
But no, that's probably, if I missed anything, it's that. So I want to throw that in for any of the food people. There is hope. If you happen to listen and want to hear us talk about food, maybe on occasion that'll come up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think big things, though, certainly I'm hearing movies, music, podcasts. That's a little more heavy to you two. I don't do a ton of podcasts on the side. But I think that's what we were kind of prefacing early on. There's going to be a lot of stuff that we have in common that we'll want to keep talking about.
So of the
culture and
podcast
stuff too.
Yeah, pop culture, current events, there will be some of that, I feel. Dylan, of the podcast that you do listen to, who's up there for you? Who do you enjoy?
Yeah, I also a big stand-up fan. I really like Sebastian Maniscalco's podcast.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of fun. I do love history. I mentioned that earlier. There's a couple great history podcasts, and for whatever reason, I'm blanking on the name. Revolutions is one that comes to mind. And I know there's more, but I like that too. I like that. I just, it's fascinating, and that ties into also cinema, because I think there's some great discussion around using cinema as a medium to teach people about history, but there's you can go off script or off historical fact for a little bit to still get that point across. And so I love some of that kind of stuff, and I love seeing it in movie. I was trying to think of I was thinking on some of the movies that I like that aren't the biggest franchises. I love Marvel. I love Star Wars. Yep. I love Lord of the Rings. I enjoy Harry Potter. I love the Bond films. There's tons of the big franchises I love. I was trying to think of some recent standalone movies. I think we're almost spoiled by these massive universes because it's so easy to get into film after film. One of the, a good example of a little bit of that, and we're not diving into movies here, but it's Chris Pine. It's one of the new streaming movies, The Last King, or it's basically, if everyone's heard of Braveheart on the planet. It's a continuation of Braveheart. It's a story of Robert the Bruce, and Chris Pine is in it. I'm blanking on the name right now, but that was one of the most recent, kind of history interesting action, it's a little bit historical. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate to still enjoy the movie, whatever. That's some of the kind of stuff I love too. Like that all kind of overlaps in there for me. But
Last Kingdom is the name.
Last
of it.
Kingdom.
It's
I was
on
close.
Netflix.
Yeah, so that one's streaming. That one's great. But that's some of the stuff that I enjoy too. That I think ties in nicely.
Kendall, we already established that you don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but the podcasts you do listen to, you listen to them a lot. Who do you enjoy in the podcast?
So as far as like podcasts that I follow, for the most part, is the sort of the intellectual dark web tagged kinds of things. So like long form intellectual discussions.
Yeah,
I enjoy.
What does that mean? Could you? It's vague even for me as somebody who listens. So, like, give me a quick example of what that might be like, and how long is long?
Long form, I sometimes an hour, but I mean, a lot of those podcasts are going upwards of 3 hours.
And what does dark web mean? Like, elaborate on that.
It's kind of this whole idea, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but my take on it is, you have sort of these. You have people who have opinions, and they're intelligent people, they're educated people, and they do interviews of other talented and educated people, and they talk about things in a way that you don't get from sort of drive-by media. So when you look at articles through social media, and then you just kind of like go through the comment section, and that's the discussion you think that people are capable of having over important topics, and then you think everything is wrong with the world. Or even then, if you go to cable news networks or even primetime news, and you just sort of get these like short little snippets of They spend 2 minutes talking about an issue that's extraordinarily complicated, and then the expectation is that America is able to develop like actual informed opinions off of what they're getting from television media, which is insufficient at the very least in time, and from social media, which is just, I mean, you can spend all day to try to verify that content.
So
intellectual dark web, you have these guys who like they'll take just 2-3 topics, and they'll talk for a long time and really get down into the deep details, and the tendency also is to have discussions with other people in a way that is trying to retrieve truth. Instead of just trying to like build up your own points that you've been taught or that you already believe, and so that's kind of intellectual dark web is kind of this movement, if you will, of saying, hey, we think we can do a job at informing ourselves and informing other people than what we've gotten, and we think long form is the way to do that.
So correct me if my summary is wrong. But some time and space are given to people who would be lesser known but might have some thoughtful commentary on complex issues.
Yeah. So
and podcasting is being used as a medium for that.
Yeah. And these guys, I mean, there's this circle of them too. They talk to each other. So like Joe Rogan is a good example, probably the most famous example of sort of an intellectual dark web kind of person. And if you've ever paid any attention to Joe Rogan's podcast or YouTube channel or anything else, outside of the MMA stuff, he talks to whoever. And I mean, he'll bring in the CEO of Twitter and talk to her about that kind of thing. In his next episode, he might bring in somebody who has everything against the CEO of Twitter, but they both have like 2 hours of an interview. And Joe Rogan does a really good job at just trying to ask the right questions and pull things. And he has enough of an understanding to be able to facilitate those kinds of discussions. And so even though a lot of people might see him as like the godfather of mixed martial arts, which he is, but he's also like this. He's also an intellectual talent.
I'll double down on that. I think he's one of the most naturally inquisitive people I've ever heard or seen.
Yeah,
he's a phenomenal interviewer. And even he expresses his opinion, but because he's so good at asking questions and he's genuinely interested in his guests, you almost forget where he stands on things because he just wants to get to the meat of what makes any of his guests tick. So he'll have a super right-wing person on, a super left-wing person on, and then he'll have
he'll get along with both of them.
He gets along with both of them. And then he'll have a stand-up comedian on, and then he'll just be silly but it's all long form. It's all great conversation. I would love to mimic some of that. I think we would have guests, like once we have some credibility. I would love to bring on guests with interesting careers or points of view, or I foresee us bringing on people to just sit in here and chat with us. I think that would be really, really fun. We'll not do it as masterfully as Joe does, but as somebody who listens to him regularly, I absolutely agree.
I would love to do it like Joe does.
Yeah, there's some things we can steal from that. I mean, again, he's in the top 10, I think, of all podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
So
It sounds like it's a really casual feel, even though the conversation might be more formal.
Sure.
You know, this isn't a sitting across the desk interview type, you know, like I'm thinking nightly news type, you know, hard hitting thing where it's a formal list of questions. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, for him, that's for others, it is that way. So like Ben Shapiro is that way, for example. He tries to mimic what you would see and expect and hear from professional news studios, even though he's not. And he's certainly part of that circle. And Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson are another couple that I listen to quite a bit. And then sort of my off-the-wall one that I've always loved is Mark Maron, WTF Mark Maron.
yeah.
I just think, he's just a whole lot of fun to listen to. That's all.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm as someone who's not a Joe Rogan podcast listener, I mean, I'm very aware of it. I don't even think you have to be super into podcasts to know that Joe Rogan has had a successful podcast for a while.
Right.
If you're kind of into pop culture or media or tech at all, I think that's something you're aware of. But yeah, it's something that you've compelled me to want to check it out because it's just not something I've consumed up to this point.
You're welcome, Joe.
You added another
You got one
subscriber.
more, pal.
Yeah, we'll notice one more. You won't, but I'll be listening.
Yeah, I like a lot of the stand-up ones. Usually, I'm in the mood for just some silliness and just some lighthearted banter. So I too listen to Pete and Sebastian, Pete Corielli and Sebastian Maniscalco. Obviously, Joe Rogan, like we mentioned. Congratulations by Chris D'Elia. He's currently one of my favorite comedians. Bill Burr, every now and then, if you don't like stream of consciousness, you won't like Bill Burr. It's very whatever he's thinking in that moment, which I like. I like his little rants when like a cord comes unplugged and he flips out. I think that's hilarious. Just started Ann Sons magazine. So that's John Eldridge and his sons that just started that. For anybody that knows about the book Wild at Heart, I'm listening to Ann Sons. Fighter and the Kid. That's with Brendan Schaub and Brian Callen. Sorry. I'm just rattling off a few. I've got a few art ones too. There's actually some of my favorite artists. Jason Seiler is one of my favorite caricature artists. He has a podcast called Face the Truth. ID10T with Chris Hardwick, formerly of Nerdist sort of fame. I kind of like the format of theirs, like all geek culture things. That geek culture, I very much think that this show would qualify in the geek culture category, but I think that means something different now than it did 10 years ago because of the rise of like the Marvel franchise. Like nobody really cared about comic books.
It was significantly more of a niche interest,
Yeah.
I think, before. And I think we saw the rise of that. Probably credit goes to started going to like Superman and Batman in what, the 80s and 90s. Was
Yeah.
probably the beginning of that being normalized.
Yeah.
Kids started growing up with the superhero cartoons, especially in the 90s. That's where a lot of you people will start looking back to like the X-Men, Spider-Man series, Justice League into the early 2000s. A lot of Batman, the animated series, and you had people like Mark Hamill, voicing some of these characters like Joker. It's brilliant versions of these characters. I think a lot of kids grew up in that 90s, 2000s. Superheroes were cool to watch as a kid. And then we started seeing those films, become incredibly popular.
Yeah,
so
and then-
I ultimately am agreeing with you. I think it's being geeky or nerdy. We've even seen the Big Bang Theory that whole has made this whole trend of even dressing kind of nerdy and wearing superhero shirts is normalized now. And I think you're absolutely on.
Similar to
point
like
there.
The Walking Dead, shows like Preacher, like all of those were graphic novels, and you would have been made fun of if you went to the bookstore and picked up graphic novels. And now it's just all in the regular vernacular. Everybody's talking about what are quote unquote geek things.
Can you imagine trying to describe a show like Game of Thrones 15 years ago? There's dragons and like wizards. You literally would have started making the Dungeons and Dragons nerd references, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, oh yeah, sure, roll the dice. Let's see who wins. I mean, there's no way that would have been acceptable. And it's like a phenomenon on HBO.
You know, to the point, I feel like there's a certain redemption there that's going on, because I think
Yeah.
when we were growing up, if you were into the Dungeons and Dragons thing, if you were reading comic books, you were outcasted, right, by the
sure.
cool kids.
Yeah.
And so in response to that, like what the least secure of geeks of that time would sometimes try to pretend to not be into it, or try to pretend to know
Good
things
grief.
about sports.
No doubt.
And-
Same
and
with
that kind of thing.
Pokemon. Think that the whole other thing. Yeah.
And then now, not only is it expected, but it's gotten to a point where I'm pretty sure I've heard more people tell me that they remember reading comic books as a kid
Yeah.
than there are people who are actually reading comic books as a kid. So now I think it's gotten to a point where like you have people pretending that they used to be geeks.
does that feel
Like,
almost?
that's-
Does that feel almost overlapped with the hipster trend a little bit?
I think so,
It's
yeah.
a little of that nerd hipster, my big glasses, and I'm going to read my paper thing because I'm pushing back
like-
against some digital.
It's like
and-
it's always cool to have that dark past.
Yeah.
I think that is like that's the hipster dark
having a
past.
CD pass now means that you were into comics. It's
Yeah.
not like I was a criminal or drugs and alcohol. Now it's like
So now you have geeks that are just like, man, did you see Green Lantern? Like, yeah, I saw Green Lantern. I like the comic books better, though. I don't think you actually read the comic books.
and we're playing one-upsmanship on, well, if you read this story arc, this movie isn't true to form. And really what happened, and those are the cool people on the interwebs now, because they read every story arc and they know what really happened in the source material.
That's so true. And then it's all relative too, right? Like we say, like I say that I'm a Star Wars geek,
yeah.
but then you go to a Star Wars a conference or celebration, and the knowledge that those guys, and I mean geek in an endearing way. Like to me, there's a difference between the term nerd and geek. Geek is like, I'm very passionate about a subject. I'm a geek about this thing. Nerd is like, I mean, come on.
Yeah, for the average listener, we would be pretty big Star Wars and Marvel fans. For Kendall, more Star Wars, less Marvel. We'd be speaking more from the middle in a bigger audience. If we went to a convention, I'm not in costume, I might have a T-shirt on.
The trivia, I mean, the stuff that they remember, I mean, or know from the films, I'm like, whoa. I mean, I love it. I've got figures and art and I decorate my office in Star Wars stuff. But then you go there and you're like, I know nothing.
Yeah, I've
never even seen these.
This is deep lore from all those comics and books and the extended universe, and I'm like, I've just seen. If it's on TV or in a movie theater, I've watched it.
Yeah.
But that's where it ends for me. Like I'll look stuff up on the Star Wars version of Wikipedia. I'll pull something up for point of reference and try to learn. But yeah, it's a way different level. So yeah, I think we summed it up good. I mean, I think we really, if you wanted to know, what we're doing here, why we're talking at you, what we're into, and what this is going to look like. I think Corey said it well in the beginning. Imagine a really fun car trip, and we just hope you'll kind of come along for the ride. We're going to find different excursions along the way, but I think at every point, everyone could find something that they would enjoy, or at least we hope so.
And I kind of love that we'll feel no need to have like a nice segue. Like we could talk about something that we experienced with our child in like this deep touching moment. And then and that's what I knew what it was to love my child. Hey, did you see the new Star Wars trailer? Like I kind of love that it would be in that way a little bit all over the map. So if people are down for that, I expect that as well. What do you guys think? I mean, about an hour. I think about an hour each time.
I think probably people are probably tired of us at this point.
At this point, for
Oh,
sure.
that was within minutes, no
Yeah,
doubt.
yeah.
Yeah, no one's listening.
No one made it
even
this far.
even the Syrians dropped out at this point.
So this has been episode 1. Thank you guys for listening. Again, check us out at From the Mid Pod on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And we would love to have you join us for whatever this thing's going to be.
Yeah, have a listen or not, but at least tell your friends. So
Whether or not if you hate it, tell someone you hate.
tell someone. Look, polarizing sells. So-
Exactly. If you love it, tell your friend. If you hate it, tell your enemy.
Yep.
To listen to From the Mid. Oh.